Putting on better. Yes. Okay. Welcome to week 4, Eco 501, section 2. Uh, I I assume that you've seen the videos, but I just checked a little while ago. The videos weren't viewed by almost the entire class. Anyhow, so what we'll do, we'll start with the share screen first. This is how we are going to divide the class. Then we'll go to the slides. Number one, we are just going to revisit what we mean by equilibrium in the market. Then we are going to look at what we mean by individual versus market demand. Then we'll look at what a demand function is, and then what we understand by shifts in demand. Topic 2 is very similar to what we have done in weeks 2 and 3, but over this time what we're going to do, we're going to show that the marginal change is the change that happens first, and that influences a change that we'll call average change. How that is influenced, we'll look at it in topic 2. Topic 3, we're going to look at what problems arise with marginal analysis and how we can overcome these problems through present value calculations. So these are more or less high school topics. If you have forgotten, no problem. Once we revisit them, they should be quite evident. Topic 4 is a new concept today. That is how we target a product. What are the switching costs when we launch a product? How do we position our product? Topic 5 is something that we need to know a lot, and that's the elasticity of demand. This is a new topic totally. And how do we interpret the various values of elasticity of demand? And then topic 6, we see elasticity of demand in graphs. Finally, we look at factors that affect demand for elasticity. And then, oh, we don't need this. And then what we do, we will look at the assignment that we will be giving at the end of the class today. Okay, so let me get back. So first of all, in topic 1, we are going to revisit what we understand by equilibrium in the market and what we mean by individual and market demand and what we mean by demand function. So let me get, shall I start the slides then?
Yes, sir.
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
Sure, sir.
Okay, lovely. Then our friend who is joining today, Miss Noor, are you okay?
Yes, yes, sir, absolutely.
Okay, lovely. So we start, and first of all, what we did, we discussed that we are interested in a market equilibrium. Equilibrium is just balancing of two forces on a balance, and we've made this hand the demand hand, this the supply hand. So at a particular market price, which is a signal for households and sellers, if we see that demand and supply are equal to each other, then we say it's an equilibrium in the market. There's no need for further change. But if it's something like this, there's a shortage because demand is more. If it's something like this, there's a surplus. So the supply is more than demand. Okay. Then what we did was we looked at what is demand. Demand is actually what we expect to purchase. Supply is what we expect to sell. If you look at figure 2.1 on page 30, you will see that the demand curve is written as Kamal Khan, Mr. Kamal Khan, can you kindly switch off your... Okay, thank you. Okay, so if you look at the demand curve, you'll see its desired rate of purchase. And the supply curve is planned rate of sales. What does this imply? This implies that the models that we are using are not actually what is happening, but what we expect to happen. Why are we thinking like this? In week 2 or week 3, we emphasized on consumers and sellers to be rational. And how did we emphasize on rationality? We emphasized on rationality as a situation that we expect buyers to behave like this, we expect sellers to behave like this once they find themselves in a particular environment. So markets are never in equilibrium. But what we want to see is in our models how good it can predict behavior. Individual demand and market demand. Do I need to get into the details of these two? Individual demand is the demand of the households. Market demand is the demand of all the households. That's simple. It's a simple calculation. So individual demand, we're looking at how a particular household exhibits their demand. Market demand is the sum total of all the demands. Now, the gap in the logic is how do we sum all these behaviors? The assumption is what is true for individual behavior is also true for aggregate behavior. I'll repeat myself in a different way. Whatever is true for an individual behavior is also true for sum total behavior. Okay, so what determines an individual household's demand for a good will also determine that of the total market. Does anybody remember in the last week or the previous week, we said there may be some people in the market, the households, who do not follow the law of demand, but their percentage will be so little in a large population, their behavior will not be able to affect the total market outcome. Remember that we said this a lot when we discussed perfect competition?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Great. That means whatever we see for individual demand, we can translate it to the sum total of the market demand. The next topic that we wanted to look at is a function. How do we define a function? On the left is our what? Dependent variable or independent variable. Those who know mathematics, how do we write a function? Quantity demanded is a function of price. What do you understand by this? Quantity demanded depends on price. When we say, for example, this function over here, that quantity demanded at a particular time, whatever the time is per unit of time, is a function of, say, price. This is what the mathematicians will say. This is interpreted as quantity demanded depends on price. So when we make this type of a statement, basically we are saying that price is the independent variable, quantity demanded is the dependent variable. And what is the relationship between independent and dependent? Independent changes first, dependent changes after independent and because of independent. Independent variable is always the change that happens first. Dependent variable is the change that happens after the independent variable, the change in price, because of the independent variable, change in price. In the last 2 weeks, we said that if this is not true, then we could have an erroneous result. For example, two events happen one after another. We automatically say that the first one is the independent because it happens first. Okay, now these are the three main variables that influence demand. Number one, the commodity.
Sir,
Yes?
sorry to interrupt, sir. Can you please just repeat that three lines, that independent changes first, dependent changes?
Okay, I'll do one thing.
Okay, sir.
Let me go for the whiteboard. Thanks for interrupting me. That means you're paying attention. Okay, let's go. Independent changes first.
Yes, sir.
What's our independent? Price.
Price.
Dependent after independent plus because of independent. This is quantity demanded. The logic that we established in the last class, maybe if you recall, is
Yes,
that
sir.
suppose I enter the room, this is the first event, and what do you call it? Say Mominul Haq, our test captain, he gets out. So two events have happened one after another. I entered the room, Mominul Haq, poor Mominul Haq gets out. Can we say that my entering the room is an independent variable? It influenced Mominul Haq to get out?
No, sir.
We can't do
No,
that.
sir.
Independent variable always happens before dependent variable, but they are linked with each other. In this case, we can say they are linked. So
Means, sir, functional relation, sir.
that's a function, yeah. So quantity demanded is a function of, say, price. And there is a mathematical convention that independent variables are always on the right side of the equation, and dependent variables are always on the left side of the equation. This is a mathematical convention that we will also follow in economics. So those of you who have forgotten mathematics, don't worry. This is just a convention. When we show something in a functional relationship, the variable on the left is the dependent that happens after. The variable on the right will always be the independent variable. So the person who stopped me, did you get your answer?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay,
Thank
lovely.
you, sir.
Let's get back. Where were we? Okay. Now, these are the three main variables that influence quantity demanded. Number one, the commodities price itself. From here, we get a negative relationship, the law of demand. Number two, related goods. Related goods we are defining in two ways, substitutes and complements. Number three, we have income. So if we look at substitute, how do we define a substitute? Either we consume X or we consume Y. Either we drink Coca-Cola or we drink Pepsi-Cola. Now, both of them are very close substitutes. So if I don't have one, I can always switch to the other one. Now, if X is Coca-Cola, Pepsi is Y, okay? If the price of Pepsi falls, what happens to Coca-Cola? The demand for Coca-Cola?
It
Dem-
rises.
Will fall, sir.
decreases.
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 It will increase. We're going to
Yeah.
show this thing graphically later on. So if the price of the substitute increases, then what happens is our original commodity, it becomes more dear. So our demand for that particular commodity increases. So we see a same relationship on the same side. So if the price of the alternative falls, then our value for our original good also falls. Complements are also related goods, but they are goods that are consumed together. So if substitutes were X or Y, complements will be X and Y. Now the problem with this analysis is our income is fixed. So if the price of, say, Y increases, our demand for X will definitely fall. Does that make sense? We consume steak and, say, whatever. What do you consume with steak? Some drinks. Okay. So your budget is fixed. If the price of the drinks increase, then what happens? Your demand for the steaks will fall. Does that make sense? If the
Yes,
price
sir.
of the drinks, and
Sir,
because carry on.
yes, sir. Like one product is dependent on other when we are consuming it. So
When
if
we're consuming it
price
together.
together.
Together, right. So that's why the
So if
relationship is X and Y. Yes, carry on.
so if the price of Y increases, then the demand of X will automatically decrease along with Y, because the
But
price
there's
of Y
another
increases.
implicit assumption, because our budget is fixed. Okay,
Yes.
our budget
Yes.
wasn't fixed, or it was quite flexible, then the price of Y increasing will not affect us. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay, lovely. And another important variable that affects demand is income. When our income
Hello, sir.
increases, yes, carry on. You want
Sir,
to
can you please explain the substitute goods again?
substitutes?
Yes, sir.
Okay, then let's go for the stop share. Do this again. Where is it? Okay, substitutes. Substitutes X or Y. Complements X and Y. Okay. Now, if the price of this one increases, since I'm not consuming them together, so what happens if the price of X increases? Doesn't this one become more attractive now? The person who asked me the question.
Yes, sir.
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
Yes, sir.
So quantity demanded of X will also increase. So they're moving in the same direction. Similarly, if the price of X falls, then what happens? The demand for this one also will fall. So they're moving in the same direction. See, if price increases, quantity demanded for the opposite one increases. If price decreases, quantity demanded for the opposite one also decreases. Now, what about complements? If the price of X increases and our budget is fixed, okay? Then what happens? Do we demand more of Y or less of Y?
Less of Y.
So this
Less
is
Y.
they're now sorry, dy now. They're now moving in opposite directions. Similarly, if the price of X falls, then we can have more of that good.
Then
So-
demand increases.
So over here, what happens is they're moving the same direction. Over here, they're moving in opposite directions. And the common sense is very simple. In the first, they're moving in the same direction because we are consuming one or the other. The relationship is X or Y. In the second one, they're moving in opposite directions because we are consuming them together. The relationship is X and Y. Is that clear?
Yes, sir.
Sir.
Okay, lovely. Then where were we? Oh, okay. Another very important component of demand analysis is the target group's income. As income increases, demand for certain goods increase. For example, when you were a student, you couldn't afford a high-end mobile. Now, if you're working, you can afford a high-end mobile. So as your income increases, your demand for certain goods increase. The reverse can also be true. When your income falls, your demand for certain goods will also increase. For example, if you have a private car and now you can't manage a private car, so what happens at a lower level of income, your demand for public transport will increase. So this type of demands we are referring to as income superior and income inferior. The best way to remember is as our income increases, the demand for certain goods increase. We call them income superior or normal goods, and the demand for certain goods decrease. We call them inferior goods or income inferior goods. Now a question may arise. There are definitely more other factors that influence demand. This is given in table 2.2. Okay. So if we look at the table, we'll see that there's an increase in or decrease in the substitute, increase or decrease in the price of the complement goods. How does that affect demand? Then we have population increasing. For example, in Dhaka city, even if the income of people remains unchanged, if tomorrow morning 200,000 people enter the city to live, the demand for eggs will automatically increase. the demand for bananas will also automatically increase. In the last 2 weeks, we have agreed that in Dhaka city, the two most common goods that are sold are bananas and eggs. So if population increases tomorrow, say 200,000 people enter Dhaka city to stay, then automatically the demand for these commodities will increase. The demand for housing will increase. Although our income and everything else has remained unchanged. Okay. Now we will look at this thing graphically. Let's go back to stock. What did we do over here? Okay. Where is that other one? No, not this one. Okay. Let's do this. Okay. If X and Y are, no. I made a mistake. If the price of the substitute increases, what happens to the demand for quantity or demand for X?
It will also increase
So do we
in the
all
case of substitute.
do we all agree?
Yes, sir.
Yes,
Okay.
sir.
So if the price of the substitute increases, the demand for the original good will increase.
Increase.
Okay. Now, what does this imply? Px remains unchanged, right? Did the price of the original good change?
No, sir.
Okay, lovely. Now, let us go back to the graph. Look at this graph over here now. Price of X remains unchanged at P1. See? But the price of price of Y has increased. So our original good becomes more attractive now. So at every price, will we not demand more than before?
Yes, sir.
The price of Y has increased, which makes it expensive. Price of X has remained unchanged at P1. So at every price, we will now demand more than before. We agree to this, right?
Yes, sir.
Right,
This
sir.
is known as a shift of the demand. So the whole demand curve shifts to the right up to D1. The opposite can also happen. If the price of Y falls, then our demand for this particular product will also go down. So it shifts totally to the left. Okay. Okay. Now let us do it with the complement. If the price of Y increases, what will happen to this black demand curve? Will it shift to the right or shift to the left? X and Y are now complements. We are consuming them together. To the left.
Left, sir.
So who said to the left? What's your name?
Yankee.
Priyanki. Okay. So Priyanki said to the left. Does everybody else agree with Priyanki?
Yes, in the case of complementary goods, it will shift to left.
Okay, then now let me generalize this topic. Any rightward movement is an improvement. Any leftward movement is a just the opposite of improvement. So if the demand curve is shifting to the right, that means people are demanding more at the same price than before. So it's an improvement. If it moves inwards to the left, then people are demanding less compared to before. Okay. So and with supply, this is the same thing. Okay. So before we move to topic 2, which is marginal analysis, does anybody have any questions? Before we move to topic 2, which is marginal analysis, does anybody have any questions?
No,
No, sir.
no, sir.
Okay, then I'll move to marginal analysis. Okay, before we get to marginal analysis, let me define you what marginal means. From the last 2 classes, we said that we don't consume 10 units in one shot. We always consume gradually. So if I'm a production unit, I don't produce 50,000 bottles for Square Pharmaceuticals in one day. I might be producing them in 10,000 units. So this is called unit analysis or marginal analysis. Now, we also made another implicit assumption that for any benefit, we have to pay some cost. So if we want an additional benefit, that means we want to produce another 10,000 units, there is an additional cost. So ultimately what we do, we calculate a net function. Net by definition means something minus something. So this is the additional benefit that we will have in our decision making. This is the additional cost. If the net, the balance is positive, we go for it. Additional benefit greater than additional cost. If additional benefit is less than additional cost, we don't go for it. If additional benefit and additional costs are equal to each other, we are indifferent between the two. We have discussed this quite a lot in the last week. This week, what we will do, we will introduce two averages. The best way for me to make people understand, any student, even if somebody is from class 5, everybody is familiar with GPA and CGPA, right?
Right, sir.
Is there anybody in today attending the class who does not know what GPA and CGPA is? Is there anybody in our class today who does not know what GPA and CGPA is? We all know what GPA and CGPA is then, okay? Right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, now which change happens first? Your GPA or CGPA?
GPA, sir.
GPS, sir.
Once we know the GPA at the
sir.
end of the semester, we can calculate CGPA. Can we calculate CGPA in the middle of the semester? Can we calculate CGPA in the middle of the semester? Yes or no?
Sir.
No,
Never.
sir.
No, sir.
Because GPA
No,
changes
sir.
first. GPA changes first, and that change influences how CGPA will change or may not change. Marginal change happens first, which is analogous to GPA. Average change happens after marginal change and because of marginal change, which is analogous to CGPA. Now, what happens if your analogy is very simple? Marginal and average change is just similar to GPA versus CGPA. If your GPA is better than the last semester, what will happen to your CGPA? Will it rise or will it fall?
It
Right,
will rise,
sir.
sir.
Lovely. So if marginal is increasing, average is also increasing. If your GPA is less than what it was in the previous semester, what will happen to your CGPA?
My CGPA will fall.
GPA will fall. So if marginal is falling, average will also fall. That's it. Okay. And this red thing, we have to remember that marginal change is the change that happens first. Okay. And this change influences the average change. So if your marginal is increasing, analogy is that GPA is increasing, your CGPA must be increasing. If your marginal is falling, i.e. your GPA is falling, then definitely your CGPA will also be falling. Okay. If marginal change is the same as before, then what happens? Your CGPA will remain unchanged, right? Okay?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Lovely. Now, what do we understand by present value? Does anybody know? This is the next topic.
Net present value.
Now, forget net present value. What do we understand by present value? Net means we are subtracting something from something. It's a net calculation. But What is the present
Sir?
value? Mhm.
I-
Yes.
I think present value, when you compare the future value, it can be, let's say, what if something can be worth in the present day instead of what it can worth in the future.
Very good. So if I have, I think if you saw the video, oh sorry, oh dear. Okay, let me see. Let me stop share. Can you see this 500 taka note? Uh-oh. Can you see? Yes. You can't. Can you see the 500 taka note?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
How much is it worth?
500.
At
Very
this moment,
tricky
500.
Why is it worth 500 at this moment? Suppose I say it's worth less than 500.
Then, sir, we have to compare with the previous data. I mean,
If I want to spend this money right now, like our friend from Gambia just said, there's a burger and this burger costs say 500 taka. Then it is worth 500 taka. But if this is the money that I'm going to spend every day on public transport for 7 days, this is the money I spend to go to work and come back to work, or go to school and come back to school. And I need 500 taka per week. So how much is it worth today? 1/7 of 500 taka. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
yes,
So
sir.
present value means, am I spreading out the costs? When we do marginal analysis, we're moving from one unit to second unit to third unit. This we are actually observing in a very short span of time. The next thing is that some benefits take time to come. Some benefits, there is a stream of benefits that will happen in the next, say, 5 years. I buy a truck for my factory, and this truck, I'll be using this truck to deliver my products to various customers. Okay, so the benefit is not going to be, I might buy the truck today for say 100 taka. Will the benefit be for only this time period, or over a stream of say 5 years or more?
5 years or more, sir.
Whatever. Okay, so say if it is 5 years, so the value of the car is not 100 taka today. If I know that the car will be giving me benefit for 5 years, then today's value is 20 taka. It's not 100 taka. You got the logic now?
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
Clear,
We
sir.
divide it into time period.
Beautiful. Now I'm going to, these are very basic things, but অনেক সময় যেটা হয় কি, they don't tell you in school these simple things. Okay, so just look at the slides now. What is the present value of taka 100 if it is going to be spent over 5 time periods and equally? Today the value of taka 100 is 20 taka. Okay, if I'm going to spend the taka 100 in 2 time periods, then my the value of the taka 100 is now 50 taka to me. Now, what is net present? One thing we have to distinguish here is accounting and discounting. Accounting means what? Counting from zero, adding. When we say count, we are actually referring to account in accounting science. We start off with a small amount, say 0, and every time period we add a little bit more. This is accounting. Isn't it possible to do the opposite? We start off with 500 taka, and every time period we are deducting 50 taka. That is known as discounting. Does everybody get the difference between the two, accounting and discounting?
Yes, sir.
Accounting means we start from a small value and we carry on adding. Discounting is just the opposite. We start with the 500 taka or 1000 taka. If our discount rate is say 10%, in every time period we deduct 10% of its value. then beginning of the next time period, we deduct another 10%.
Gradually decreases.
Decreases. This is why it is called discounting. Discounting means we start with a large amount, and according to some principle or whatever, in every time period we deduct something. So we are counting, but we are counting reverse. Okay, so discounting is, if the discounting factor is 50%, that means we're going to spend our entire capital in 2 time periods. If it is say 0.1, the discount rate, we are going to spend the entire capital in 10 time periods. Okay, so Taka 100 is worth Taka 50 if our discount rate is 0.5. Got it? And
Yes.
again, what is our decision rule? Our decision rule is very much like marginal benefit minus marginal cost. If additional benefit is greater than additional cost for 1 time period, we go for the activity. Similarly, with net present value, if our stream of benefits in the next 5 years is more than the stream of costs that we have to bear, then net present value is positive and we go for the activity. If our stream of benefit is less than the stream of costs in the next 5 years or whatever our time frame is, then we don't go for the activity. The net present value becomes negative. Got it now?
Yes, sir.
So when we talk about net present value, we are actually looking at a stream of benefits over time, and we are comparing it that with the stream of costs that we have to incur in order to get that benefit. Just like marginal benefit and marginal cost, if the additional benefit over a certain period of time is greater than the additional costs we have to incur over a certain period of time, net present value is positive, we go for the activity. That's it. And nothing new. Oh, this is, no, we don't need this. Okay, so up until now, is there any confusion or any questions that you want to ask before we go for topic number 4? Are there any questions you'd like to ask before we switch to the next topic?
No, sir.
No, sir.
Okay, now this thing, as we see in the slides, are 3 things that we are very important for people who want to make a decision. That is, how do we target our product? Who's going to have it? Number 1. Number 2, when we launch a new product, is it something that people are going to buy for first time, or is it something that people are going to buy for second time? If we are targeting first time buyers, there is no switching cost. If we are not targeting first time buyers, there's a switching cost. For example, I start importing cars that run on batteries. Okay, and the batteries are guaranteed for 2 years. So this is the hybrid cars. Okay, now that's a great advantage because I don't have to worry about pumping in fuel or gas after a certain period of time. But if I already have a car, will I be willing to buy a battery car that easily?
No, sir.
No, sir.
No,
So
sir.
there is
It
a
will need
switching
some convince.
cost, right? So there's a switching cost. So how do you make it attractive for me who already has a car? Somebody who doesn't have a car, it's easy for you to attract them. So you can target those. Next is positioning. What is positioning? Positioning means how can you make your product attractive to your target group. I'm going to discuss these things right at the end when we before we do the assignment. For the time being, just write down on a piece of paper, how do we target a product? Are there any switching costs? And how do we position a particular product? Okay. Now, this is the main topic that we want to discuss today. That is elasticity of demand. Let me stop share. Is there anybody in the class who knows what elasticity of demand is?
Forward.
Yes, sir.
Sir.